Episode 16, When Johnny Comes Marching Home. This is part 3. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to have you back to part 3, as I said, of the When Johnny Comes Marching Home story. And don't forget, if you missed any part of this, part 1 and part 2 are in episodes 14 and 15, so you can visit those later. Imagine this story combined tells the story of a song composed in 1864 and brings us right up to about 2003, a period of, rounded off, 140 years. Imagine if Patrick Gilmore had known all those years ago that his song, his creation, and his plea that Johnny would be marching home would last this long. I'm sure he wouldn't have believed it. And you know something? I wouldn't bet against it lasting another 150 years more, at least. So, you're all very, very welcome, and I hope you're all happy to be back to this story. I asked some people over the last few years of my research whether they knew the story of When Johnny Comes Marching Home, how long it lasted, who composed it. And as it happened, most of the people that I would have asked were either American or Canadian. And I figured they had grown up with this song and it was part of college life and so on and so forth, and they'd have heard it. Anyway, they all replied, "Oh, yeah. That was during the war, wasn't it?" "Yep." I said, "Yeah, the Civil War, wasn't it?" And I said, "Was there anything else about it that you knew?" And most said no. But a number did say to me, "Wasn't it in some movie?" I said, "Yeah. Do you know any of the movies it was in?" No, they were fairly adamant. And of course, none of them ever heard of Patrick Gilmore or P S Gilmore. So at the end of this documentary, I'm going to give I'll give names of some movies that you have in all probability seen, and they all have Johnny Comes Marching Home included in its tracks. So this episode is about that part of the story that no one seems to know anything about in the 20th century and the great effect of the song and how it was used by all. As I always do at this stage, I ask you to click like if it's appropriate for you and subscribe to this story. Some people, incidentally, have asked me, if I subscribe, do I have to pay something? The answer is clear. No, absolutely nada, nothing. But what will happen is you will be notified about any new videos that are coming out, and that's a free service, etc., etc. It'll help me in the story, and I hope you've noticed, hopefully, that it's improving. I'm definitely trying to learn, and if there is something you'd like me to do or something you don't want me to do, please point it out to me in the comments below. By the way, you can also contact me through gilmoresband@gmail.com. So back to the story. In 1899, the Brooklyn Eagle newspaper, closing out the century, revisited the songs and the importance of music in the Civil War with a wonderful article about the value of Civil War music. And there was 2 references to Johnny Comes Marching Home in that article. And it said specifically about Gilmore's creation that it was the most rollicking march song ever composed. and that the alteration of solo and chorus is not the least feature of this piece. And today, 35 years after its appearance, it's still a favourite with military bands. That was 1899. By 1902, a military opera was very popular on the stage called, again, Johnny Comes Marching Home. And it seemed to have attracted the attention of all, with the combined interest in both military and matters of comedy. We can see that the run of this opera continued to 1903 and into 1904, when the review actually made this point that patriotism is the key note of this production. However, every so often, Johnny raised his head, if you like, to create headlines for articles such as this story of a young lad who went to Canada in 1908. By 1914 and the beginning of a war in Europe, we still, by the way, didn't know how long this war was going to last for. The Indianapolis News, in an article entitled, "When the War is Over," suggested that when this war is over, things are not going to be the same for the Johnnies of the great armies flocking to fields of slaughter, whether they be Johann, Jan, Han, Ivan, Giovanni, or Hans, all marching home. But by 1915, with the war a year older, we were being reminded what songs to sing, including Johnny Comes Marching Home Again. America by 1917 was starting to prepare for Christmas, when Johnny Comes Marching Home with 25,000 other troops were going to Camp Meade and Camp Dix as mothers, wives, and sweethearts rejoiced. And the words of the ballad were reprinted over and over and over to remind people of its uplifting appeal. But by 1918, still not all the Johnnies were home, and a job of reconstruction would have to be done in Europe. As memories of the Great War faded, so too, it seemed, Johnny Comes Marching Home did. But by 1936, a mysterious article about patriotic music was uncovered and unearthed, with the melodies of the Civil War once more. But with the rumours of upset in Europe again, and indeed militarism on the rise, the wonderful grand old ballad got what I call the Miller Magic by Glenn Miller, a release on record for just 35 cents in 1942. And the men will sing, and the boys will shout, and the ladies, they will all come out, and we'll all be gay when Johnny comes marching home. It's worth listening to actually on YouTube when you get a chance. But it's also wonderful to hear the hit lists of the period with famous names like Miller or Tommy Dorsey or Paul Whitman turning them out. It gives you a great atmosphere of what was going on in people's heads at the time. In 1943 in Hawaii, the show Johnny Comes Marching Home was playing in 2 locations, and the RKO film review gives some idea of its popularity. By 1944, Glenn Miller had Johnny at number 1 and Helpless at number 2 on top of the charts. On the home front, with the possible end of the war, worries were being voiced about what all of the Johnnies would do when they came home. And while Glenn Miller was still at the top of the charts, Morton Gould had released his American salute with Johnny Comes Marching Home as its spine. The war ended, and in January of 1946, 3.5 million cheered the arrival of the 82nd Airborne Outfit on Fifth Avenue with the headline, Johnny came marching home to surging Fifth Avenue throng. And by 1951, a Marine called John brought home stories printed about the war in Korea and his experiences. Right now, the article concluded that Johnny is just glad to be home with his wife and 7-year-old daughter, Mary Lou. But later headlines appeared, such as Johnny won't march, pointing out how complicated the Korean War was compared to the war that had spawned the wonderful march, Johnny Comes Marching Home. By 1960, after JFK had won the election, Boston was planning a big party when the new president would come marching home to Boston. But a year later, the centennial of the Civil War was being observed, and according to the article, an estimated 10,000 songs were composed for the war. And a discussion ensued about the great, glorious, and indeed the useless ones of them. The article concluded, the one song produced late in the war that was sung by both sides was When Johnny Comes Marching Home. By 1968, the Vernon Daily Recorder noted that Johnny Comes Marching Home from Vietnam, when that happens, he's not likely to be deafened by the hurrahs of welcoming Americans. On the contrary, he's often greeted with national silence. There was an additional note about the marijuana problem following Johnny home, also from 1968. And then unanswered questions from Vietnam from Johnny. It seemed that Johnny Comes Marching Home was inexorably linked to all the wars and all parts of each war because it took the side of the soldier, the one with most to lose, including the Johnny POWs coming home. Then by the 1980s and 1990s, we had peace until the Persian Gulf War. Songs of war and peace were listed. Letters started appearing about Desert Storm and the worries about their son's survival and how they will be treated when Johnny comes marching home. Or in this case, comes limping home. Then Morton Gould passed away in 1996, but his American salute would last for generations. And in 2003, in the debate about the weapons of mass destruction and General Powell's declaration to the UN, a senator declared clearly at the time that Johnny will not come marching home. He'll be required to stay in the country with tens of thousands for an extended period of time. That senator was Joe Biden of Delaware. And so that concludes a brief history of a simple but deep song about war, but really peace, which doesn't take sides or judge the participants. But this song is now part of all of us, and for that we can only thank P S Gilmore. Oh, nearly forgot. Those movies I mentioned at the very start. With Johnny Comes Marching Home and its tracks. Well, the first one I'm going to give you is Die Hard with a Vengeance. Jeremy Irons, Bruce Willis, and Samuel L. Jackson. The second one, you'll have to go deep into your memories, black and white. It was a film about World War II called Stalag 17 with a young Peter Graves. He'd be the future Mission Impossible lead actor, marching round in a camp in World War II to the sound of When Johnny Comes Marching Home. There's plenty of whistling in this, if you remember. And the third one is a film called Dr. Strangelove, and it was the bomb run, again with plenty of drums included, and this was a Stanley Kubrick soundtrack. So, again, please click like and subscribe and comment about the story. Anything you know that I didn't mention, anything you felt that shouldn't have been mentioned. How should we all remember this song? Or is it important enough to be remembered? Talk to you next week and take care, everyone. Bye bye. Thank you.